Today, I'm gonna show you how to create real 3D text inside of After Effects with no plugins in just a couple clicks. Plus, I'm gonna show you a way to stylize it based on this template as an example, and I'm even gonna show you how to take 2D graphics and turn them into 3D. There's a lot here, so let's just get started. So let's just start off by showing you how to really easily create real 3D text. With After Effects open, start by creating a new project and new composition. Now, before you click OK, this is actually where the most crucial step is. You need to go here to your 3D renderer option and select Cinema 4D from this dropdown here. If the name Cinema 4D scares you, don't worry, it's just a settings change. We're not leaving After Effects. Now click OK and we're ready to start making things 3D. So I'll start by adding a new piece of text by clicking the text tool, clicking on my window, and then just click and start typing in what you want it to say. I'll make mine say motion. Great. Now this is just a perfectly flat 2D piece of text, but to make it 3D, all we have to do is click two buttons. Go down here to where this little 3D layer symbol is and click it. It should look like a cube. If you can't seem to find it for some reason, you can expand or collapse your layer switches by clicking this button here. It should be highlighted blue. Now, once we click this little 3D cube icon, we're gonna have two extra text parameters available to us. And the one we want is geometry options. Drop it down and you should see something called extrusion depth. And as you raise this up, you're gonna start to see your text expand into 3D space. And I'm just gonna increase mine to 120. Now you can hit the C key and click and drag around to rotate the perspective of our text, and you can see that we've got real 3D text in After Effects. But if you wanted to create something like this, or this, you're gonna have to stylize it and make it look a little bit nicer. And what happens if you wanted to make an object or an image 3D instead of text? We're gonna go through all of that, so don't worry, let's just start with stylizing this piece of text. And we'll be getting some inspiration from this template here. Now, the first problem that we have is that even though it is 3D, it doesn't really look like it. We've just got a bunch of white that's melding into each other. So in order to give our text some definition, I'm gonna start by creating a light. Right-click on this empty space and select New Light. And I'm just gonna choose a parallel light. We can leave the default settings for now, and once we hit OK, you can see that immediately we have some definition to our 3D text. So now that our 3D is actually kind of looking like 3D, let's quickly create a scene that takes advantage of this. Let's create a camera so that we can move it instead of our text to get some perspective. Right-click anywhere here and choose New, Camera. And I'd suggest setting it to anything 35mm or below, because the wider the camera angle, the more you're gonna be able to see the 3D perspective even from a head-on angle. Hit OK, and you can see that even with a front-on camera angle, we can see the depth of the 3D text, being able to see the inside of the text from both of these different sides. So even though it's not moving yet, we can already get a feel for the fact that it's 3D. Next up, let's create a subtle zoom in by moving our 3D camera instead of the text itself. Go to your camera settings, and on the first frame, let's set a keyframe position, move forward in time a bit, and then increase the value of this third number here, which is the Z-axis, and we'll do a little push in with the camera. Now let's highlight this keyframe, right-click, and set it to Easy Ease In, and then click this button here to get into our graph editor, and we can pull out this handle to make it ease in even more. And if we go back to our normal view, we can see that we have a nice subtle motion that's taking advantage of a changing perspective of our 3D text. Now with our motion down, let's go over to our parallel light here and let's go down to the light options. Under here, you should see an option for intensity, and we're gonna keyframe that to start at the very beginning of our composition at 0. The reason that we're doing this is because if we turn back on our black background, our text is gonna start completely hidden in darkness, and then we wanna slowly illuminate it over time. So at about here, let's keyframe the intensity to rise back up again to the point where our text is illuminated, not fully, but enough that we can see it, and it's not spilling evenly across all of it. So this is what we have so far. Nothing crazy, but we're just getting started. So now let's create another light, right-click, select New, Light, and this time we're gonna be creating a spotlight. Hit OK, and now we're gonna work on keyframing the position of this to move around our text. First, I just wanna get the look dialed in. It's a little bit too bright, so I'm gonna reduce the intensity a little bit. Then I'm gonna decrease the cone angle so it's more focused in one spot, and then actually I'm gonna raise the intensity back up a little bit more. Now let's go ahead and open up the transform options of our light so that we can move it around, and let's move the position of the playhead to the spot where we want it to start moving. Set a keyframe, move it forward, and then adjust the position of where we want it to end up. Now let's keyframe the intensity of this light to start at 0, and then move forward to about here where we want it to be at full brightness, and raise the intensity back up again. Now to make a second spotlight, just highlight the original and then hit Ctrl or Command D to duplicate it. With this new spotlight still selected, press the U key and you'll see all the keyframes that we generated from before. Go to the first position keyframe and move it to the other side of our text, and then go to your ending position keyframes and then move it to the new ending position that you want it to end up in. So with that, right now we have this. Not bad, but there's a couple finishing touches that we can add to really give it some depth. Highlight all of your layers, then right-click and select Pre-Compose and move everything to the new composition. Now we're going to duplicate this layer and add a Gaussian blur to the bottom layer. Keyframe it to start at 0 and then get to 250 about midway through. This creates a subtle glow that actually helps to illuminate the scene and make the 3D aspects of the text stand out against the black background. Now we can add a new effect to the top layer. Let's go up to Effects and Presets and search for CC Light Sweep. Pop this onto the top layer, and now we can set the center to be right in the middle of our composition, and then keyframe the angle to start as it is, but then rotate one full cycle over the course of our composition. Then decrease the sweep intensity to 0 and keyframe the edge intensity to start out at 0 at the beginning, and then jump up to 50 over the course of about 12 frames. This is going to isolate the light sweep to just the edges of our text, making it look like the lights we added before are interacting with the corners of our text. Adjust the width and the edge thickness to your liking, and now we've got a scene that looks like this. A really subtle, but really clean looking way to emphasize your 3D text. And if you wanted to add a bunch of other flares like metallic texturing, all in a template that's ready to go, I've left a link to that in the description below. So now you've successfully created 3D text, but what happens if you have a 2D graphic and you just want to give it some depth? If we bring in an object here, like for example, I have this playing card, scale it down to the correct size, and if I set it to 3D, I can move it around in 3D space, but it's perfectly flat. And if I drop down my settings here, I do have geometry options, but there's no option for setting extrusion depth. So you're gonna need to follow these steps in order to actually make it 3D. The first thing to do is highlight the layer of the object that you wanna make 3D. Now it's important that whatever you're using, it needs to have a transparent background so that we end up only giving depth to the actual object we wanna make 3D. I'm gonna highlight my playing card, then I'm gonna go up to Layer, Auto Trace. And now all of these default settings are fine. Feel free to just pause the screen if you want to make sure that your settings are the same as mine, but the default settings should be fine. Click OK, and what you'll find is that After Effects has automatically traced around your object and created a mask for it. This is perfect because it does a lot of the hard work for us, and we're going to use this mask to create the depth. There's a few technical steps that you need to do, so make sure to follow along exactly with what I'm doing. Drop down your mask and you should see Mask Path. What you want to do is copy this parameter by highlighting it and pressing Ctrl or Command C. Now you want to go to your Mask 1 or Overall Mask setting, right-click on it, and select New, Shape Layer. This will create a new shape layer over top of your graphic element. Now in this shape layer, drop it down, and underneath Contents, click Add, Path. Now there's one more little piece that you need to follow exactly. Deselect Path, select the shape layer again, and then using your pen tool, just make one simple click anywhere. It doesn't matter where. And now without doing anything else, on your keyboard, hit Ctrl or Command V to paste the mask that you copied from earlier. And now you should have the trace outline as a shape within your shape layer. Now you can see that mine is too big right now, but that's because I changed the scale of my trading card at the very beginning. So I'm just gonna go to the scale parameter here and see that it was set to 48. And in my shape layer, I'm gonna set that scale to 48 as well. And now they're exactly the same size. And if I take the opacity slider of my shape layer and drop it down to 0, we can see that it reveals a perfect match to our trading card layer. Now this is great because the hardest part is already done. All we have to do now is a couple things. First, click the 3D layer on our shape layer. This may or may not make it disappear, but it's okay, it's still present. It might just be behind your trading card layer. Now you should also notice that under your shape layer options, because it's 3D, you now have geometry options, and under geometry options, you have extrusion depth. Now you can increase this slider to give some depth to your image. And voila, you've got a 3D trading card or whatever graphic it is that you're using in your example. But now there's still some final polish that we can give to this. Underneath our shape layer content section, we can go to Shape, Fill, and we can set the opacity to 0 because we don't want to see this purple face anyways. But now in the stroke section, this is where we can change the color of the outside layer of the trading card. If you want just a quick solution, you can take this eyedropper here and click the color of the area that you want it to match to. So for me, that's just this whitish section here in the middle. And then you can click this swatch here and slightly drop down the darkness to give the subtle illusion of 3D without having to add any lights. Or the other option is that you could just create some lights. Right click, new, light. And just like that, you've got natural looking 3D that you've created out of a flat 2D object. And if you wanted a really quick solution to making awesome looking 3D text, I've listed a bunch of amazing 3D title templates in the description below that you can use to just type in what you wanted to say and have immediate amazing results. Those can all be found down below, and make sure to check out this tutorial if you want to keep on learning and growing inside of After Effects. I'll see you over there.